City Center Radio. It is episode 87, and I am your host, Christian Sanger. Today is Monday, February 20th, 2023. Hope you all had a great weekend. Maybe some of you were off today for President's Day, so if so, enjoy yet another day off. Wish I could say the same, always busy working, but I did have a good weekend. Big news in my world is that my parents arrived on Saturday. So happy to see them as they're in town to visit for my birthday, which is coming up. So very happy to have them here for that. Nothing huge to report. You know, they've been kind of laying low since they just got here. But we did go to Martin's Barbecue on James Island, one of our favorite spots to go to when they're here. And honestly, one of my favorite spots, even when they're not here. Always enjoy it. Lots of good options on their menu. So we enjoyed some time on their patio, despite a little bit of chilly weather the evening we went. But they had heaters on, which was nice. We were outside because their dog is here and she gets to come with us. So we have to, stay outside when she's eating with us, of course. So thanks to the heaters, we were pretty comfortable and enjoyed another good meal. And I'll definitely keep you posted on any other fun things we do around town. But if I haven't mentioned it before, Martin's Barbecue, which has been here for a few years, always a good stop, always a good place to go to on James Island if you have a chance. And you really can't go wrong with anything on the menu. Just about everything myself, family members, friends have ever ordered, we've always enjoyed. So definitely recommend checking it out if you haven't yet. Speaking of birthdays, not only is mine coming up, but my brother's is on Tuesday. So since this is the only episode before his birthday and not one on it, wanted to make sure I said happy birthday to my brother Eric. My baby brother, although he is not a baby, and he is also not my little brother, just my younger brother is all. He's very much an adult. But yes, happy birthday to him. All right, enough about me. Let's dive into the latest news since the last episode. The Murdaugh trial, although not quite close to being done, the prosecution has rested their case. And so that section of the trial is over. The final witness for state prosecutors was someone who went over the timeline of events on June 7th, 2021, when Maggie and Paul were both shot and killed. That timeline went over things like cell phone evidence that was shared with jurors over the last few weeks, as well as some GPS data that was recovered from Alec's car. SLED Special Agent Peter Radofsky spoke at length about that car GPS information that was sent to investigators late last week. So this is pretty new information that came out. Prosecutors were attempting to use this to shore up their own timeline of what they say are Murdaugh's movements the night of the murders. Radofsky told jurors that the backlight for Maggie's cell phone turned off around the same time that Murdaugh's SUV went by the location where his wife's phone was ultimately found the next day. He testified that GPS data showed Murdaugh's car slowed down near the spot at 9:08 p.m. So pretty damning evidence there that his car just happens to not only drive by the location where his wife's phone was found the next day, but also slowed down right around the area where it was found, indicating, of course, that he was slowing down as he was throwing it out the window or what have you. So honestly, all this talk about financials and stuff that, crimes and his alleged drug problem and all these other things, certainly important and speaks to motive and maybe him being erratic and making poor decisions. And there has been a lot of talk about that. I recommend going and looking up some of the testimony about Paul being called like a little detective by his family, because if Alec had pills, he tended to find them. It was known in the family that he was having issues with pills. And I recommend you all checking out that testimony. Like I said, it certainly helps put the whole case together. But I think the most damning evidence has been the cell phone data and GPS data. All of that is putting Alec at the scene of the crime. It's negating what he has said previously in interviews and to family members about how long he was places, where he was. A lot of lies, people may say, or perhaps just really poorly remembering things, some others may say. But I think that has been the most damning evidence so far. It's placing him, at the dog kennels where where his wife and son were found moments before the murder occurred. It's also, like I said, the GPS is showing his car slowing down where his wife's phone was found. Definitely I think that's going to be hard evidence to overcome, but perhaps the defense can do that as they will start their side of the case this week. Now, there is no court today due to it being President's Day, and the defense is going to pick up on Tuesday at 9:30 a.m. With what News 2 says they are expected to have a lengthy witness. So we'll see who that is and what exactly they'll be talking about. So that'll pick up tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. Moving on, some not so great results for South Carolina students. Last Monday, the South Carolina Education Oversight Committee met and discussed how students did on the National Report Card, which is also known as NAEP. And as I mentioned, the results weren't super favorable. So twice a year, for those who don't know, selected 4th and 8th grade students take this national exam. South Carolina's 8th graders on this most recent results have dropped below their previous scores on the test. So 8th grade students in South Carolina were 5 points below the national average in the reading scores, so not very good there. Lawmakers and educators are saying this decline is probably due to several factors, including mental health of students, school threats, and a number of uncertified teachers instructing classes. According to those NAEP test results, 4th grade reading and math scores did not decline in South Carolina, which is good. So they didn't decline like their 8th grade counterparts. However, they were 1 point below the national average. So although their scores didn't go down, they're still below the average of the rest of the country. So that's not exactly the best of news either. And a lot of that makes sense. The pandemic disrupted a lot of learning and threw off a lot of things as schools went virtual and, kids were in and out sick or teachers, whatever. You are all well aware of what the pandemic did to folks. So that's certainly a factor. That also goes towards mental health, which certainly makes sense. And this whole uncertified teachers thing is fairly interesting. A lot of teachers we've talked about previously, or you may have seen in other news outlets, that teachers are leaving the profession, especially here in this state, for a variety of reasons. Pay, of course, being one, not feeling supported during the pandemic, as well as during these culture wars about teaching of, subjects that involve racism and race and LGBTQ matters, whether those are real or imagined issues, as we've also discussed. They're not feeling supported by that. There's legislation going through that's going, if passed, would allow parents to sue school districts. There's going to put a lot of restrictions on what can and can't be taught. There's talks about, the legislature stepping in to make sure that content is being taught is approved by an entity that they think is the right group to make that call. So all sorts of reasons, it all makes sense, and of course, it all adds up to South Carolina students being below national averages, and that's not good. And we are well aware that the education in South Carolina, as a whole, is not good. Again, lots of schools probably doing amazing in the state, but as a group, it's very concerning, and it shows no signs of getting better. And some of these things that teachers are upset about are not going away. We have elected a superintendent who is not going to be on their side based on things she has said, and the culture wars she was fighting during the election are the things they're concerned about. So very concerning indeed. And as I mentioned, there's no signs that things are going to improve. Back here in Charleston, residents of the Dockside condominiums, which are actually the tallest building in Charleston, if you didn't know, they may be forced to vacate that 19-story harborfront structure by the end of this month if the condo association does not come up with a city-mandated plan to immediately stabilize damaged support columns within the structure. So this story comes from the Post and Courier, who did a great job detailing what exactly is going on. They say engineers couldn't assure Charleston officials in recent meetings that the building could withstand the added weight of firefighting crews in an emergency, which prompted the city's push for immediate action. Obviously, very concerning if there's a fire or whatever emergency may involve multiple people having to come into the building, but specifically they mentioned firefighting crews. The building might not be able to sustain that added weight. That is obviously extraordinarily concerning. In addition to that, there was asbestos also discovered last summer, which, by the way, requires a state permit to remove. So that put a halt into the extensive structural repairs that were being planned and starting to be worked on in the building. So just issue after issue, it seems. The building is more than 40 years old, and it's the latest to join a growing list of the nation's coastal structures, especially buildings like this, condominium towers that are facing expensive structural repairs to avoid the risk of collapse. You may remember that horrible story in Florida where a building collapsed and killed many people. So, engineers were asked to evaluate Dockside after that collapse in Florida, and they ordered an emergency stabilization work to begin last April. And work did start on fixing those 35 columns that they expressed some concern about. But the city, for whatever reason, has no record that the workers had local permits for the job, adding yet another wrinkle to this whole thing. And then the work was halted, as I mentioned, when that asbestos was discovered. So just all sorts of questions and issues surrounding this. And obviously, if you're a resident there, you must be very concerned about all of this. So then by this past November, an engineer had identified 88 locations at Dockside with, quote, potentially dangerous structural conditions, end quote. And they suggested that those repairs were going to be needed within 6 months. However, as I mentioned, the work is still paused because the site doesn't have state environmental permits regarding the asbestos. That is according to city officials. So, they have this work they need to do, but they had to stop it due to the asbestos, and they don't have a proper permit yet to get rid of the asbestos. So, what a headache. So, this letter from the city says that they have ordered Dockside to evacuate on February 27th unless the Homeowners Association complies with a list of steps that it must take. Some of those steps include hiring a fire protection engineer to certify that the building would be safe for first responders. Another is to have an engineer certify the building is safe to remain occupied, and also come up with a plan for asbestos removal so the stabilization work can continue. The Dockside Board of Directors, in response, has said it is working on meeting the city's requirements. So hopefully they get this figured out and our residents in that building can remain safe. All right, let's wrap up this episode with some stories that are a little bit more fun. That's what we like to talk about. Yes, there's serious things going on, but there's also all sorts of fun things going on in Charleston. So first, let's talk about the Riviera Theater. If you're unfamiliar with that, that's that iconic theater located in downtown Charleston. It sat vacant for a while and didn't hold any public events for over 45 years. So the building was built in 1939, or I should say rather the venue itself as the Riviera Theater began in 1939. But it hasn't been open to the public, as I mentioned, in 45 years. However, that streak ended back in March of last year when Bemoke Hospitality Collection became the owner and opened it up to have concerts and other events. So as you may have heard me say, March of last year, they're approaching their 1-year anniversary. And to celebrate that milestone of reopening, the Riviera is going to have 3 performances that are going to be, used as their 1-year anniversary celebration concerts. But in addition to that, they're going to offer concessions at 1939 era pricing. More on that in a moment. They're also going to have some VIP ticket offerings for those shows and a chance to win 2 tickets for all shows at the venue for the remainder of the year. So all sorts of fun stuff for their first anniversary. So first off, those shows that I mentioned, they include The Head and the Heart on March 11th, An Evening with Patrick Davis on March 24th, and then Andy Grammer on April 7th. Tickets for all 3 of those shows are on sale now. If you're not familiar, the venue is not very big, so there are not a lot of tickets available. So if any of those interest you, be sure to pick up your tickets as soon as you can. So for all 3 of those shows, which they're calling their first anniversary concert series, all wine and beer concessions will reflect the pricing from 1939. So what does that mean for you if you go to a show? That means if you decide to buy a beer, whether it's local or, another domestic option versus a Charleston area brew, all of them are going to be 65 cents. And if you want a glass of wine, that's going to run you $1.10. Amazing. $65 cents for beer and $1.10 for wine. So for anybody going to a show and wants a drink, you can get a few pretty cheap. That's a pretty good deal. So, as I mentioned, as an additional promotion, they're also offering guests who purchase tickets to any of those three shows. They will be entered to win 2 free tickets to all shows at the venue for the remainder of the year. The winner of the giveaway will be selected at random based on the email that is used to purchase tickets. And the winner will be contacted at that email on April 10th. So if you buy any tickets to the 3 shows I mentioned, you're automatically entered. And on April 10th, you may receive an email saying, hey, you got 2 tickets to every show we have the rest of 2023. So lots of fun stuff going on at that venue. It's been cool to see that open. It's so cool seeing that old school kind of marquee out there, and to know that a venue that has been here and since 1939 is back up and running. That's pretty great, and I hope to catch a show there at some point. Now we've got some ice cream news, my favorite, ice cream. The sad news first is that OddFellows Ice Cream Company has closed, and just over a year after opening, unfortunately, that downtown Charleston location has shuttered. No reason has been given for the closure, but this is a Brooklyn-based business that was at 550 King Street. They originally opened their doors October 28th of 2021, so they made it over a year, but unfortunately did have to close here this month. On the flip side, some fun ice cream news. Jeni's Splendid Ice Creams, which, by the way, is very close. They're located at 501A King Street, so they're pretty close to Oddfellows, which may have been part of the problem for them, as well as other ice cream locations in the area. But in any event, Jeni's Splendid announced that they have partnered with Warner Brothers and an upcoming release of Biscuits with the Boss ice cream, a limited edition flavor that is inspired by the Emmy Award-winning series Ted Lasso. The collaboration will officially launch on March 2nd, so we're not too far away from that. So if you couldn't tell from the name, as I mentioned, the flavor is inspired by the iconic Ted Lasso character, his homemade shortbread cookies that you see in the series, and his daily ritual of having biscuits with his boss. So even if you're not familiar with the show and this whole biscuits with the boss thing, you still might be interested to hear the flavor. It's going to feature shortbread cookie crumbles that are folded into a salted butter sweet cream ice cream. Sounds delicious. This limited time flavor will be widely available at jennies.com/TED, T-E-D, and in scoop shops, as I mentioned, beginning on March 2nd. The local Jeni's Splendid Ice Cream is expected to have it, so you can go check them out, as I said, at 501A King Street. All right, we're going to stick with food news, and we're going to revisit a company I just mentioned. That's that Bimoke Hospitality Collection, who is behind the Riviera Theater. They also just opened a restaurant. Sorelle is now open, and by the way, they partnered on this restaurant with the Mina Group. That opened on Wednesday, February 15th at 88 Broad Street. And what makes this restaurant unique, at least from the description, is that it's set within 3 reimagined historic townhouses. So it makes me think of like how 82 Queen is in multiple buildings. So same idea in that sense. The owners say that the restaurant is inspired by Italy's all-day cafes and markets and some of their culinary traditions. The restaurant is going to feature a mercado, a central bar, a wine room, a pizza counter, and what they call a grand dining room, which will offer a variety of dining experiences for locals and visitors alike. So different floors, different buildings are going to have basically different themes, which is pretty cool, but all revolving around Italian cuisine in some capacity. So as I mentioned, restaurant is now open. They are accepting reservations. They're using a reservation platform called 7 Rooms. And depending on what side of the building or the restaurant you want to visit, like which section, they have different hours. You can check that out. In the show notes, I have a link to the Holy City Center story about it, so you can get some more information. You can also go to sorellecharleston.com. And for all of you libation fans out there, Charleston Cocktail Week will be returning to the Holy City for its 2nd year. You can enjoy the event from April 24th to the 30th. And so what is this event? If you don't remember from last year, basically anyone who wants to participate can, enjoy food and beverages galore here in Charleston, but specifically, there's going to be specialty priced cocktails and some signature events during that week. During the festival, pass holders can visit participating bars and restaurants to enjoy specialty priced cocktails, and at select locations, a small entree or appetizer pairing with that. And they did post, which you can see on my website as well, a list of participating venues, and there's a decent amount, and I'm sure more will be added to it since we're still a couple months away. So you can check the show notes if you want more details, but you can also go to charlestoncocktailweek.us for more details. And lastly, I like sharing these, as I mentioned in a previous episode, these random rankings that websites put out. Wallet Hub, if you've never heard of it, is a website that does like multiple rankings of really bizarre and kind of out there things every week in Charleston or sometimes the state, if they're doing state rankings, appear on them. And sometimes they're fun to share. And of course, how could I not share this next one? According to a Wallet Hub study, which they're using that term very liberally. South Carolina is this year's 9th most sinful state. That's right. Personal finance website Wallet Hub recently released its report on 2023's most sinful states, and South Carolina checked in at number 9 on the list, which is actually the same ranking from last year. Well, as the Holy City's most prolific sinner, of course, I'd like to take a lot of the credit for this ranking, but I'm going to need you all to be on more of your worst behavior in this new year. So in 2024, we can be a little bit more sinful because 9 is top 10 is nice, but we need to do a little better. So why I say the term study is kind of used loosely. This isn't a scientific study by any means, but if you're interested, to determine where the U.S. has the most moral growing to do, we shall say, Wallet Hub compared the 50 states here in America based on 7 sinful behaviors, which included anger and hatred, jealousy, excesses and vices, greed, lust, vanity, and laziness. You can get more details on how exactly they looked into those metrics, again, on the show notes on my site. But yeah, again, just a fun little ranking thing going on. Before I leave you, just another reminder that the Charleston City Paper's final voting for Best of Charleston 2023 is now open. I am honored and thankful to be nominated in 4 different categories, and all of which fall under the news and media section. We've got Best Local Social Media Influencer, Best Local Instagram, Best Local Website, and Best Local Twitter. So I would certainly appreciate your votes in all 4 of those categories, or if you think someone else is better, that's fine too, but I would appreciate any votes from you all. I greatly, greatly appreciate your support. And be sure to fill out other categories as well. You certainly don't have to, but you can vote for more of your favorites. There's tons of categories. It's fun to go through and see who was nominated and make sure, your favorite place ends up winning. For more information on voting, you can go to bestof.charlestoncitypaper.com. So you can just grab your phone right now, click on the podcast you're already listening to, look at those show notes, and just easily click on over to the Best Of website. It won't take you long to get there at all, and you can vote to your heart's content. Nice and easy, so go ahead and do that. I appreciate it. You can also support Holy City Center by going to holycitycenter.com/shop to pick up some merchandise, or go to patreon.com/holycitycenter and sign up to be a patron of this podcast, website, and everything else I do in Holy City Center land. I want to say thank you to everyone who has done that, and anyone who has rated and reviewed the show. It always helps. If you haven't done that yet, that would be amazing if you could do that. Just, get in there, click on the ratings, maybe leave a short little review, help this podcast get in more people's ears. I also encourage you to subscribe to the podcast, which not only helps me out, but also will make sure you don't miss any of these episodes. I want to say thank you to Lindsay Marie Collins of LMC Sound System and Best of Charleston nominee for Best Podcast, FMB Radio. Be sure to check that out. And thank you to Tyler Boone, whose music you hear in each and every episode. I hope you all have a great week. Until Wednesday, I have to say to you, good night and good luck.